everything that happens, but there's a lot of us that care a lot about this, and almost all of us are most certainly steelhead fishermen too. So that's us. And then one more quick show of hands for everybody. So everybody that has actually fished lower Kenai Peninsula steelhead. Yeah, so there you go. I mean, it's a pretty great fishery that we all have connections to. So Jerry introduced the project, or how the dots were connected. Really excited to kind of walk you through what we did this season. So let's change the slide. I'll look at something else. Okay, just quick light history stuff. Steelhead, kind of fascinating. Thought it would be worth kind of discussing, you know, what we do know about steelhead here in South Central. Interestingly, you know, within Cook Inlet, as far as we know, there's only steelhead on the Kenai Peninsula, and then there's a couple tributaries over in Kamishak, Kamishak Bay and West Cook Inlet behind Augustine, where steelhead have been documented. But overall, the species is Omicus or rainbow trout. Steelhead are just the anadromous life form. Rainbow trout are the resident life form. Those two can spawn together. Rainbow trout can produce steelhead. Steelhead can produce rainbow trout, right? And so that's the only real difference. In fact, most of the rainbow trout that are stocked in the lower 48 are from the McCloud River in California, and those most certainly were steelhead. So they're just interchangeable. Within that, for our lower Kenai Peninsula streams, we refer to them as fall run fish. Those are fish that are returning from sea in early to late fall, kind of over a period of time. We'll see that for what we got out of this project. But steelhead start returning actually to the lower Kenai Peninsula in late July. And we'll still see fish coming into the river all the way into October, some years probably November. In Alaska, we also will have spring run fish. As far as we know, we don't have any on the Kenai Peninsula, but it's definitely very possible for the limited information that we have. Spring run come in, they're more common in Southeast Alaska. Those fish have a very different spawning behavior. They don't come in until spring. They come in, spawn quick, and head right back out. So their residency time in freshwater is way less. But all that said, rainbow trout, steelhead, fall run, spring run, they all spawn at the same time in a drainage, right? And so like our spawning closures that we have for streams for fishing, like on the Kenai River, that spawning time is the same for steelhead. An important difference for our steelhead is that they can be repeat spawners in comparison to salmon, right? So steelhead can spawn, survive that event. They're called kelts. They head back out to the ocean, come back and do it again. The age of our steelhead, the first time that they spawn, they spend primarily 3 years in freshwater before they smolt, head out to the ocean. And then they spend 2 years in the ocean rearing before they return and overwinter in freshwater and then spawn. So they're 5 years old the first time they spawn. When they kelt, go back out, they'll spend 2 more summers in the ocean, so they overwinter one, and then they're back the following fall, so 2 more years of growth. So the second time that they spawn, they're 7 years old. They can live, as far as we know, up to 11 years old on the Kenai Peninsula. That smolt size is about 6 inches. That happens in the early summer. And then I just, like with Cook Inlet is kind of the northern extent of their range. If you want to be picky about it, like Logan's going to tell me, yeah, Hungry Hollow, tributary to the Volcana, is actually the farthest north that Omicus are found in Alaska. But let's just say, if you drew a line across there, Cook Inlet has waters that go that far too, but maybe not steelhead. So on the Kenai Peninsula, There's been some work done with steelhead overall, but these things are tricky, given all that like history stuff that I just told you. There's been very little work done with them overall, kind of given their importance. But a big one that was done that probably provides us the best information, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Kenai office out of Soldotna did a radio telemetry study for a few years on the Kasilof actually, and not the lower peninsula tributaries. And they tagged the fish in the fall, looked at where they overwintered, and then looked at where they went and spawned. That's lots of great information from that to lean on. USGS in the late 90s and into the mid 2000s were doing some tagging studies with acoustic and archival tags. On the Ninilchik River, they tagged kelts as they were heading out. Acoustic tags just do a sound ping, and so they were looking at how the fish went out into Cook Inlet after they kelted. The archival tags were attempted to be recaptured to look at how they move. They didn't have great success with recovering those archival tags. And then Fish and Game tried to do some radio telemetry work in the early 80s on the Anchor. That was with limited success. They kind of had more survival with that, but there were a couple of gems in that study. One of the big one that we got just to better understand the fish. But they radio tagged a steelhead that had come into the Anchor in the fall, and that fish in the spring left under the ice and then went up Storiski Creek to stall. So kind of interesting. I think that gives us a little bit of information that Anchor River fish might not just be Anchor River fish, that these lower Kenai Peninsula fish are more of a meta population supporting one another, which makes sense kind of given the run sizes. Okay, Hal. Just quick, because I'm an area manager, like you always gotta squeeze in regulations. Oh, yeah, hey, great.
Is that Steelhead?
Yes. Fan club for Brittany. All right. That's everywhere we go. So Anchor's been, or the Lower Kenai Peninsula's been catch and release only for steelhead since '89. It's single hook, no bait. You can't remove them from water. In 2011, the regulation changed. Instead of closing it at the end of December to all fishing on those streams, it got bumped up to protect steelhead that were, kind of progressing towards, settling in for the winter. And then the last one I put for unwritten rules, since I figured there'd be a bunch of fishermen here. But one thing I love about fishing on these streams for steelhead is usually a high level of angler experience as our primary anglers. You can be a new angler and come and participate in these, but the anglers that do consistently come are high level angler. And with that, I've seen a lot of respect for other anglers. Anglers tend to give others space, wait until a spot is unfished or until somebody else is done fishing, and then they can move in. So anyways, if you do come down, just show some courtesy to other anglers and get to experience it the way that you want to. I have the catch data just here, just so you can see our statewide harvest survey estimates of catch for steelhead kind of over time. We've had some really big years. These years here were leading up to this. In recent years, we've been with really low catches, and I promise you, there was probably a little extra effort here in those years. I think these were probably peak effort years too, but I promise this is probably a pretty decent reflection of abundance, given kind of the stable effort that we really do have. Water conditions will play into it a little bit, but overall, when we see these really low catches in recent year, I feel that's a reflection of our runs. All right, Holly. For those of you that aren't familiar with the anchor, there's the Sterling Highway kind of parallels it for this long section, which is pretty awesome for fishing, provides lots of great angler access. You see all those nice little turns. There's lots of places for steelhead to be. In the up until 2024, our monitoring for the last decade for Chinook and coho escapement were at 2 weirs above the forks, the confluence. In this past season, we progressed or transitioned our monitoring to a main stem weir farther down river. We actually have some property with some cabins, so it's like basically behind our field site. If you're really familiar with the anchor,
Great spot.
yes, thank you. It's at the tail out of Dudas Hole. At the tail out of
Great
Dudas
spot to
Hole.
have a weir, yeah.
It's a great spot to have. Exactly. The benefits of this location are really great for us. The channel is very wide and the gradient is really low. It's probably the best spot that I know of to actually be able to maintain a weir and get good passage. The other benefit to it is it's above the maximum intertidal, and for the most part, there's not much for overwintering or holding fish below that. So when we knew that we were moving the weir down there for a better location for monitoring things in coho, we knew that that was also going to benefit steelhead as well. Next up. So this is a resistance board or floating weir. This is what it looks like. This is at the Dudas Hole. These are a bunch of panels. Click the next. Yeah, okay. So these are resistance board weir, for those of you unfamiliar, this is a 3-foot wide by 20-foot long panel that's constructed of 1-inch PVC, anything that you can get from the hardware store. These panels all hook together to, kind of form a fence across the river. They hook to the bottom of the river that has a rail with a cable on it, and that's covered with skirting. So there's only one location for fish to be able to swim through. This weir is also equipped or fitted with an underwater video system. And so there's one little passage location. It's about 1.5 feet wide. One of these panels is modified with a hinge for the fish to be able to swim in. Then it goes into the video chute that constricts them down to about 10 inches wide. And that's attached with the camera box. Back for just a second. So this is our Anchor River crew last season cleaning the video box in season. So camera mounts in the back, you're about to see that. Clear glass mounts to the front of it. The box is basically a boat, but we fill it with tap water. So the camera has a buffer of clear water to see through. Then the fish, regardless of how dirty the water is, in 10 inches of super dirty, most turbid water we can see fish great. So that's the system. Next one. Okay, and so there's the camera. This is just an underwater camera. And these are underwater pond lights. Reason we use pond lights is so that the video is consistent 24/7. Right? We make it completely dark and then illuminate it so the video always looks the same. This is what the camera is looking at. The backdrop there. There's a toad
Sea lions.
with sea lions. We mark the backdrop to give us some size reference to. One thing that we do this video shoot is with a little ramp just to pick the fish up, slows them down. Interestingly, Holly and I have been kind of refining underwater video weirs over the last decade, and there's some nuances. We kind of learn different fish, how Chinook, coho, and steelhead move through these video systems is different, and we modify it to basically get a nose to come into the video shoot and a tail to wave. We want the fish to swim in, kind of pause so we can look at it and measure it, and then it be on its merry way, and we're not really impeding it at all. So the system runs 24/7. The camera is with a long cable. You can see that in the photo. I should have pointed it out, but long cable, it runs back to a computer that has a DVR installed in it. And so we use motion detecting software. As the fish swims in, it triggers the motion. It does a pre-record and a post-record for the whole video. Video files recorded to that computer that's synced with into a cloud-based storage location that's syncing with a folder back at the office. As soon as the fish swims through, it's at the office and ready to be counted. And the beauty of that system is that, one, it allows the fish to pass through whenever they want to swim through, right? So they can come through 24/7. It doesn't take somebody to be standing there to let it come through. And then two, for us, it condenses all of the video for the day into a few files that can be reviewed pretty quickly. So we can review 24 hours of video footage in, a pretty short order. So get to see some good video here. What else we got, Hub? Oh, that kind of got messed up. So here's the daily counts. I mentioned when I started talking, but we counted first steelhead at the end of July, right? So if you think about when I was talking about spawning, they spawn in spring, late May into June. That puts adult steelhead into these streams 12 months out of the year. It's kind of fascinating. Obviously, this is kind of classic if you looked at weir counts for anything. You start off with a few, and then you have a period of time where you're getting a whole bunch, and then it kind of tapers off at the end. This run had a couple different spikes. That was definitely associated with water conditions. That definitely influenced it a whole bunch. So peak daily count was 90. We ended up with just under 1,400. We had a couple gap periods where we didn't have any fish at all from floods and ice. We can look at a couple photos of that. We ran it all the way to October 31. The last fish we counted was on the 23rd. So we ran it for another 7 days. I feel like that gave us a really complete count. The gear stayed in place the whole time and went really well. Some little angler benefit, maybe a lesson in run timing here, but starts off low and we definitely, like, we start seeing a long tail like that. You count them all, you keep counting, maybe you get a trickle, but this is the bulk of your run here, right? So from what we call the quarter point, or when you get 25% of the run to when you get 75% of the run, that was 20 days. So it's fairly compacted, even though there's a lot of effort. I think most of the effort is happening later. This steelhead run's coming in for most of the effort, right? So kind of fascinating. If you asked me what the kind of the midpoint of the run would be, I would say mid-September. And so this run definitely behaved like we kind of thought the run would. We have information from other years when we've run the weir. So kind of already know that. This year was maybe more typical. I don't know, Jim. What do you think? But we probably had 3 or 4 different water events to keep them moving. One thing for these steelhead that we thought a lot about over time is the falls that we've had have been very different over time. We've had some really dry ones and have seen a lack of fish with those. So I do feel like water conditions could influence it. I think this one's a typical one. I think we can easily see that shifting a little bit later if it stayed low and hot like we saw in 2019. Another one, I was hoping you'd be here to see this, Jim, just to kind of get a feel for when steelhead are moving through the lower river, right? Maybe as an angler, I tend to think, particularly with salmon and steelhead probably too, but moving fish tend to be a little bit more aggressive and bite a little bit better compared to fish that are sitting. And so steelhead start moving actually in the late afternoon, and they kind of go all the way into dark and then, taper back off. So early morning hours through the whole fall, pretty inactive fish. So the vast majority of the fish are moving in the evening right before dark. So what's that? One might refer to it as the golden. Wine glass. So I'll see you at dark next. Okay, so here was a couple of the challenges that we saw with some of the water events. This is September 3rd. I would say that it doesn't look terrible, but I would describe that as bank full. It was in the grass on both sides. This weir was high and dry, no biggie. That photo was like, we got this. Pretty excited about it. And then mid-October came after Brittany came down and caught all the fish in the calm period. But this is what happens to a floating weir when you start getting really high water. I would say this was probably a 2-year water event. Actually, there was that much water. Basically, what happens is those panels start catching debris that comes down, and in October, the battle is it's nothing big. It's just an accumulation of small debris, leaves, and so leaves build up. The panels start coming down. Leaves start building up out there, and then it's down. But it's just down just below, the water line. So it's sunk. You wouldn't be able to see it or know that it was even there. But then we come back in and get in and start cleaning it all off, and it just pops right back out. So in those periods of time, leading up to it, you would expect if you were going to get fish, you would count them leading up to these water events. But the video is still going. Fish obviously could swim over. They could also go down over the top of this, but by and large, I think we maintained a very good count for that. Okay, now the real trouble. Yeah, you want
The flooding that they're experiencing, if essentially that area expands, are we able to just add to an existing weir in this? Or how does that work?
Oh, I see. Yeah, in this situation, everywhere is different. For where it is, but this one that you're seeing, we buffer it. It's basically weird all the way up until it would be almost a catastrophic flood. So the banks are even weird. That they can't ever get around. If it floods beyond that for the anchor, we wouldn't even be able to drive our trucks there. Yeah, Holly's got it.
The weir comes out, so it's not in right now.
Yeah,
so it's not there.
Right. I just didn't know if there's a lot of change to the geography of the area.
Yes, it definitely changes all the time. I kind of mentioned that we were monitoring at other sites, and the primary reason that we left those is because the channel changed so much. They just got more and more difficult to be able to maintain the gear at them. And then this was new for us a little bit. Ice is just as bad as leaves, it turns out, at sinking weirs. And it just it was forming basically where the water was slow. I mean, obviously the river, you can see it's flowing ice there. So anyways, another thing, but we survived all that too. So I mentioned that that backdrop is marked, which is pretty cool. It gives us some size reference. These that fall within, I kind of assume that these are the ones that are first spawning. This is their first time. Generally 22 to 26 inches. You'll see kind of a size gap. These are pretty common. They ended up being about 40% of the run this year. Kind of surprised. You would expect that to be maybe a little bit higher. But the good news is this size class, which was 60%, those are, I would categorize them generally as all repeat spawners. Most certainly that 28-inch size, like this fish that you see here, that's probably just over 28. It's probably not like pushing 30 based on how that looks, but maybe it's there. But so hold on, 28, second time, you get to 30, 32, 34, that's second or third or fourth time spawning. Yeah.
Wow. Maybe you guys keep track of it, but what was the largest that you saw come through?
I know we just generally looked at one, but I think it was probably 34 inches. Did we see anything bigger than that, Holly?
So,
I heard rumors of a lot larger, and that's just from local guides and from people who spend a lot of time down there. But then seeing some photographic evidence, it seemed like there was some larger ones.
I don't doubt that you can have them, but I promise you from what I've seen with video or
Well, it's probably hard
like-
to also track if it goes off the page too.
yeah. If we saw one like that, the crew would go crazy. We would figure out how to get it measured in half. But we've seen thousands of steelhead. Anything over 36 inches, like a true measurement, that's a 1 in 1,000 fish for our streams. They really are not common. So if you heard of anybody 34 is the top. Anything beyond that is a fish of 2 or 3 lifetimes. Is it possible? Yes. And I have seen photos of fish that size, but even at work, we rarely see any fish over 32 or 33 inches.
Thanks.
Yep. So I just kind of thought I'd put it in perspective for what we had for counts in other years. Like Chenery said, this was the first like full, really complete count. And some of that has we've had other years where we actually tried to count steelhead in the late 80s. And that was at the current location where we are now. But it was with a stand-up fixed picket weir and a live box that crew had to do it. And that year is just not conducive really to survive the fall. And there were really large periods of no counting and when we probably could have had it. But generally speaking, this other one right here, 2020 is probably our best other count to compare to, which was quite low. Actually, that was when we were monitoring at the Two Forks. We pulled the weirs on October 26th that year. We went downstream as we were pulling the weirs with the beach seine and just to see if there were actually fish downstream. And just at the bridge hole at the anchor there, I think we caught over 20 steelhead with the beach seine in the first set. So those weren't a part of the count. So how much of that run did we count? Not really sure. But overall, pretty good one. And then, that same weir setup in 22, we did keep it all the way to October 14th, which was, was still over 1,200 fish. So that one's probably mostly complete. But anyways, here's how it looks. For the TU contribution for the Southcentral chapter that took their fundraising funds and donated that to us, it went directly to our seasonal staff, Danielle Seeger and Sarah Ferris. Both of these two are they're fully invested in career fisheries, and working for the department, and they work seasonally. And the funds that were donated went directly to give them a longer season to be able to do this project. And so just to put a face with the work, both of these two are great, and they were the ones that actually did all of the work. And then we had a great event where TU came down to see the project in action this year. So it's just kind of a wrap up photo of everybody that participated in that day when it was icy. And that's it. That's all I got. A few links of some of the other Steelhead tidbits, including real times article that Ryan put together. If you guys aren't a real time subscriber, sign up and you can get real times, kind of a hodgepodge of fishing information that we assemble every month. It's kind of a good little newsletter. Glad to open it up for questions. Oh, we've got a taker. That's great. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. Didn't talk about it. So I showed the catches, right, in that figure. And now we have a complete count. We don't have the 24 catch yet from the statewide harvest survey, but we'll be looking at that for sure. I suspect, just given the fishing this fall for the anchor, it'll be somewhere around 1,500 to 2,000. The count again was just under 1,400. So that suggests that every fish was, caught 1.5 times thereabout. Some of those other years, if we just took the other catches and looked at that run size that we had this year, we've probably had years where they've been caught as many as 3 or 4 times. Generally speaking, that's kind of a fine catch rate, actually. That's something that I would be comfortable with. Go ahead.
How many fish go in the fall?
So kelps in the spring?
Once they go out in the fall, they never come back.
Not really. I'm sure Holly, do you know, do we have some steelhead going back down through the video?
I don't think it was.
Okay. Yeah, right.
Yeah, the new one's pretty.
Right. I think it was mostly upstream movement. Those, if we were able to get the video weir in really early, I suspect that there is some downstream movement under the ice or fish coming from another drainage that came into the fall coming into the anchor to spawn. We would start to see that kind of movement right away in the spring. So back to your catch rate question, that run that we counted is the count to assess the catch rate. There's obviously extra fish that are probably of the number of spawners. We use a statewide harvest survey, which is a mail survey that's sent out to random households to respond to your fishing for the year, and then those reports are taken and extrapolated to the total numbers. Generally speaking, the Anchor River as a fishery or a location water body gets a decent response rate, and we see it overall. It kind of matches with what we see like for the catch rate, and we see magnitudinal changes over time. So the statewide harvest survey's in the ballpark. It's not a perfect real census of how many fish are caught, because if we ask steelhead anglers, they're not going to tell us anyways. So
I saw one.
Angler bias is something that Logan would harp on me about. So anyways, yeah, that's that. Hope that answers your questions. Yeah, next victim.
Do you have any sense of what the trend is in average size returning adult spawn? And is that following the trend with returning adult salmon, or steelhead robust to that?
To answer your question, no, we don't have the data. The only size information is what I just showed you. We haven't been collecting any biological data from steelhead at all in the fall. It's kind of like, leave them alone. You know, we don't want to disrupt the fishery. It's not really information that would be beneficial to, you know, kind of managing this super conservative catch and release sport fishery. So just leave them alone. And then when we see them as kelts, well, in the spring, when we're collecting biological samples for kings, they get the royal treatment again. It's like, now they're post spawn, they're heading out. We don't need to bother them and take lengths and collect scales, though. It's probably something we should consider moving forward. But generally, from what I've seen in handling steelhead and for the work that we've done, it's stayed about the same. I think that proportion of repeat spawners will fluctuate a little bit. I think we just caught it in a really good year. There's some years that it would be flipped, and the vast majority of the fish that you would have would be the first time spawning fish. So, yeah.
I have a question, a regulation question, and it's towards the Casila over the some of the rivers.
Yep.
With the regulations and as stated on like the Anchor and majority of the other rivers, you know, closing on November 1st, and then they have an opening that is quite a bit later. On the Casila, there is not, to my knowledge, there's not such a closure, and especially during the spawning period, I understand that there is a, you know, king fishery that's still going on below the bridge, and but it's still technically open regulation wise above the bridge in some of the spawning areas. And my question is why?
It's a great question, and it's one I promise you that we're going to be looking at very closely going into the next board cycle. There's been a lot of discussions on where the Casila really fits in. Kind of, it really is the blend of the Kenai and the lower peninsula streams. But it's kind of been off the radar a little bit with the Soldaten office mostly focused on the beast of the Kenai River and with those fisheries, and us managing everything south. But we've had a lot of internal discussions on better aligning those regulations, and most certainly steelhead are a big component of that. Watching it very closely, and I think the spawning closure, we have spawning closure for these steelhead that we just talked about. Kenai River has spawning closure, so I think you're likely to see us discussing a spawning closure for the Casila. How do we work that in exactly with the start of the king fishery is a little bit different than what happens down on our streams, because the Casila king fishery 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Right. The lower peninsula streams are weekend only fisheries that don't really start until Memorial Day. So I think we're gonna have to look at how to deal with that, you know, figuring out how to get some protections for steelhead that make sense in the Casila without giving up too much for that king fishery. But
What do you think? 81, 15? I mean, you fish that river more than anybody. And for kings in the spring, what do you think?
Not quite, but I think
I
that,
think May 15.
I mean,
No bait.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like no fishing before May 1 or May 15, and May 15 goes.
I mean,
In March.
there's a lot of spawning going on throughout. I don't think like on the sea loft you don't see the majority of the king fishing happening until after May 15th. And even then, post May 30th is really when it blows up. I mean specifically the upper sea loft, I think it's fair to say that it's closed to king fishing on the upper sea loft. So why isn't it closed to steelhead fishing? And that's where I think a lot of the anglers that are chasing steelhead are going versus the lower. That being said, like swinging for kings is super rad, and like well 100%. I mean there are anglers that as well.
It's like
Right. Yeah,
That makes sense.
I would say that at least the upper should be closed, but the lower is something that is harder. And just saying you're targeting a king versus steelhead, I mean, you're fishing such similar gear. I've been out there swinging for kings and ended up on a steelhead, and it's just how it goes. But I think I don't know. I don't have the answers.
I would definitely, for those of you that fish the Casilla, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to Phil Stacy. He's the area manager there, to have these discussions leading up to the next Board of Fish meeting for the Casilla, which isn't that far away. They always like just pop right back up. And so this time next year, you know, is when we should be formulating proposals for the Upper Cook Inlet Board of Fish meeting. And I think getting involved with that process for those that fish it, if you guys work it out ahead of time and come to the board with something to address it and try to kind of come up with compromise, the board members love that. And those proposals tend to get moved forward, particularly work with the department and the other users, take care of it ahead of time for them. You basically have done their job. They just will do something. So
Is that in Cordova this year?
no, that's the Prince William Sound meeting. So, but yeah, Upper Cook Inlet is typically either in Soldotna or Anchorage.
It was last year in Anchorage. There's different groups for different areas. I know that there's one out of Anchorage that they have more pull and they have representatives. It's like a small board for each area.
Yeah,
Yeah,
advisory.
advisory committees.
Yeah.
And so there's different advisory committees for like the Anchorage area, the Cooper Landing area has one, the Soldotna area has one. Getting involved with those or communicating with those representatives have a lot more pull than some of the other groups. So if there's people that know people on those advisory committees and can get that message out to those advisory committees, and if those advisory committees are on the same board, then that will go through very efficiently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
another thing is just an individual person can write a proposal. And then you go to an advisory committee and ask for support or not.
Yeah,
So that takes work off of them.
Yeah.
Lots of different options.
So essentially, like, even though I'm in a different district than the area that I'm fishing, would my proposal still like stand or shot though?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah, the board process is a great opportunity to be able to change regulations. It's important to, in addition to submitting a proposal, to go through the full process and like come to the board meeting and talk to board members. If you really feel strongly about a regulation change, you've got to follow it through and do all of the steps to actually make any progress. So
So if you're not necessarily a member, but you would like to advocate for something, what is like the best approach to that if I just approach an advisor? Like,
yeah,
alternatively, like, should I like send an email and sufficient game, or like outside of that, like what are my other options?
well, first I would say if you have a fishery issue, to reach out to your area staff, have a conversation so you can gain a little bit better understanding on why things are the way that they are. And then go from there. If you feel like, oh yeah, I think I have something here, I would consider writing a proposal, going to the AC meetings like we were talking about, and see if you can get some traction from other people. The more people that you can get behind a proposal to change it, the board takes written online comment for the proposals that get submitted, and then come to the meeting and give public testimony, participate in the committee process, talk to board members, just generate as much interest in the proposal to make the change is how it happens. And I've seen things happen at the board process that you wouldn't expect to get any traction. And board members hear a stakeholder and they get completely behind it and will champion the proposal and it goes through. Gets other board members involved.
So as a member of the general public, do I have access to seeing what other,
All the proposals.
all of the proposals,
yep.
and what is the access source?
So the Alaska Board of Fisheries has a website. It's a fish and game website. Within that, kind of outlines the structure of when the meetings for each area occurs. It provides the meeting information for current and past meetings and the process for submitting an online comment. It provides all the board members. It outlines the whole thing. It would be a deep dive to jump in and get started, but it sounds like you have enough interest. I'd encourage you to go take a look at that and see it.
Like support something that's already been submitted.
Yep.
I just wanna know how to.
Yeah, so you go to the board's website, there'd be a link to submit online written comment. And you can write however you feel about the proposals that are in front of them for this cycle.
So open discussion.
Yep, it's open discussion. It's a complete public process. I mean, it's really unique system that Alaska has. And it happens every 3 years for every fishery. Each meeting is kind of clumped for an area. And so it's constantly happening. We just made these changes and we're about to start formulating our changes again for the next meeting. So yeah, it's constantly evolving and getting involved in that process is huge. So I've been going to board meetings for 20 years. And what I see at board meetings is that it's the same people that were there 20 years ago. There's fewer of them and they're about 20 years older. Seeing new people getting involved in the board process is a major limitation to changes with fishing regulations in Alaska. I promise you, people are not taking advantage of that opportunity. It'd be great to see more people getting involved in the back.
When's the next one that fishery meeting?
Lower Cook Inlet will be December 26th. So it's the same as the Casila or the cycle every 3 years. So the next meeting is December 26th. So submitting proposals for these fisheries in the Lower Peninsula would be this time next year. They'll be due by mid-April of 26.
Thanks for hosting this. This is super cool. So this will get people talking. For sure.
Yeah.
So you should start with like the decrease in fish numbers over the years. What's like the lead cause mortality rate and like sport fishing and like a substantial negative impact on that?
So the steelhead counts over time, that figure was mostly incomplete. Weir counts is mostly what I'm showing. There was, our golden gem that we all just contributed to in comparison to incomplete weir counts for other years. So I don't think that this is a reflection of what we actually got because we only ran the weir till August 3rd. The vast majority of the fish come in mid-September, like I showed. So, and then what was the second part of your question?
Is sport fishing having a negative impact on?
I would say negative impact, probably not. This is a fishery that we love very dearly. We watch it very closely and have a close eye on it for concerns to it. But overall, the regulation structure that I outlined, catch and release, single hook, no bait, can't remove them from water, and then a closure period. You basically can only fish them in, late August through October. So we have a 2.5 month season on them for when they're spending, 8 months in freshwater. So I feel like it's one of the most conservative sport fisheries that we have in Alaska. The angler skill level, of course, catching fish has some impact to that individual fish, but overall, for what we see with these steelhead, even in the spring, these are very healthy fish. They have lots of protections. Anglers love these fish, so they're going to do what's best for the fish and make sure the fish are released. They're not gonna hold them out of the water over their head or anything like that. So, yeah,
You envision a world where, along with your daily fish count, you get a public video of the box, or here's your sonar data set that we got this fish count from, or it's better to be behind closed doors.
Depends on how you wanna look at it. Generally speaking, I'll even back up, even before generally speaking. Philosophically, as a state employee that is funded by sport fish restoration dollars, your tax dollars on buying sport fishing goods, it's not our data, it's yours. And so, want to make sure that that information that's yours is completely available to you because it's yours. And so that's just like philosophic, right? Like, yes, there's probably times where you don't need to know every little minutia detail, but what we do is paid for by anglers, and so it's yours. Make sure we get that information out there. Generally speaking, don't manage by keeping information from people. For us, we structure regulations that the fishery is sustainable. We don't need to keep information from people, so we can keep it sustainable, right? That's a game. I see, this really is angler benefit. This is giving you more information as an angler. Now, different hat on. Would I feel like that dude just told this whole entire room how to fish for steelhead in the Anchor River? I've been fishing there for 30 years. Now I got to deal with all these guys here. Yeah. Maybe. But if you're a good enough angler, you'll still catch your fish. These fish are not easy to catch. Yes, you can catch them. It takes real work and real skill. And for anglers that have put in the time to fish these fish and find where they are year in and year out, they're earned catches. You can't just take these counts and come down and catch steelhead. So.
No daily counts.
So.
I think you guys are crushing it with where the weir's at and everything you're doing, so keep up the great work.
I get the hesitation though, and I completely acknowledge it. It's something to think about, but it's without pause because everything else we do is out there with counts. But as soon as we started posting steelhead counts, you are not alone, I promise. We heard from plenty of you. Yeah.
I think that goes back to your question about are anglers negatively impacting the sportsmen, women negatively impacting the fisheries. Did somebody say that over there? Yeah, I think it's the opposite, right? I think we are actually making a positive impact because everyone in here who has a fishing license, everyone that buys fishing gear, we support these projects. And I think that's something we should be really proud of as anglers and just really acknowledge that because we do that. I mean, we're one of the few groups that's going to put our money where our mouth is because this work doesn't happen without us. Without me, without you, without TNU, it's you. So I think, to answer your question, I think big bucks. I mean, I think TU wrote a big check. Our chapter wrote a big check to help with this project. And that's something we as anglers should be proud of. So does it impact it? Yeah, it impacts in a positive way. I think that we should acknowledge that as anglers and celebrate that. Yeah, I think it does impact.
Thanks for touching on fishing etiquette too, as you see these fish streams, a little more crowded, that's huge. But also holding other anglers accountable, you see somebody doing something wrong, or even really, I'll call them out. But also, keeping them wet, taking care of the fish. I think it's everybody's kind of job to look after those streams.
That's definitely in the unwritten rules, and I forgot about that one, but the self-policing is huge. I have been called to the river to resolve some arguments, which isn't fun, and I usually end up kind of frustrated with both anglers, just in case you're ever thinking about doing it, just make sure you're on the up and up, if you're gonna call, you're gonna like but it does, and it works so good. I love these streams because of that. Like, there's so many eyes on it that everybody keeps everybody honest. Of course, we all know and have seen something that we didn't like, and that like kind of chaps us a little bit. But by and large, these streams are with anglers that really, really do care. Yeah, in the back.
I got a couple of questions for you. I'm glad you used the term sustainable and escapement. Frequently in the regulations, you'll see that abbreviation, sustainable escapement goals, mostly for salmon. Okay, and could you confirm that the sustainable escapement goals are based on a rolling 5-year average or something like that? Is that the formula that they use for that?
Salmon?
For any species?
It's a little bit more complicated than that. I think you'll have to get Brittany back here for another night. But generally, no, they're not a rolling 5-year average. Most escapement goals for salmon in Alaska use the entire data series of escapements over time. Yeah. So we look at, in the best case scenario, we look at the recruits per spawner, the number of fish that a spawning escapement produced over time. That shows us the productivity. That data is modeled with a record model to look at how productive the stock is. And the escapement goal is based on a range of escapements where that specific stock is likely to be the most productive, produce the best yield. They are yield-based goals.
I've noticed I've been here 30 years, those numbers have been dropping the past 30 years. And that's a losing battle. So if it was sustainable at a certain number here 25 years ago, and now this is the number down here, you're fighting a losing battle. So I guess the best way to address that would be from the Board of Fisheries and say, listen, minimum is minimum. And it's, to be sustainable, that's got to be the minimum.
That is a conversation that is had at every single board meeting, every single time. It's something when, as we see the changes in these runs over time, Chinook are obviously the easiest one to point to. You'll see, what you see is that we had really large runs, and now we have really small runs, and escapement goals are generally coming down on both ends. Historically, like the runs that we had were nearing carrying capacity, right? We probably, like, hold your ears, but we probably could have been harvesting more kings in the past when we had these really large runs. We had kind of conservative management because we didn't have the monitoring tools that we do now. We're learning more, and we're seeing a broader range of escapements. You plug all those escapements and all those returns into the model, and it fits a line to the data. That doesn't have anything to do with what you actually get back. It just tells you in an ideal scenario, when the stock is productive, you put 5,000 fish in and you get 15,000 fish back. So that's how our escapement goals work. And that's how they kind of get driven down a little bit, because we're learning that the stock can be productive over time. Right now, no. And so that's something that we need to work on internally a little bit more and have more discussions on identifying, really, do we want to allow harvest at low escapements when we're in a low productivity period? We have the tools, and we have been, closing fisheries and controlling harvest when things are low. What's the right amount of escapement and fine tuning? That there's some more work for us to do.
My second question. Okay. This data gathering that we did, that sounds like a one-off. what do you think would be the optimal way to do it, either on a, couple of years running or, a set frequency or so, in order to have really good data moving forward?
For Steelhead in particular.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'll just say that the cat's meow would be, we run this weir every single year for the next 20 and we get complete counts and we see the trends over time. We incorporate a radio telemetry project so we can look at where they overwinter and their spawning distribution. So I showed like the Sterling Highway runs along the anchor. There's a lot of land use in there. I think it would be really important to identify those overwintering and staging locations for permitting. So like, oh, we know that this is a really critical reach of the river. Let's make sure when there's land use permits that information can be conveyed for issuing those permits. Spawning, where do they spawn? Okay, now we know a little bit more about their use in the watershed, how much they're exposed to the fishery for the management and the structure of the fishery. All those would be really good. That would be the best. Stepping off of those two things, picking away at it the best that we can. I think more 1 year, yeah, we're in a ballpark. Getting to see some contrast in the escapements. What's the low run like we had for 21, 23, there's been some really poor runs that I suspect were, probably down around, just a few hundred fish recently. So counting a year that's low escapement, catching the really big one would be good. So we know the range of escapements, how that relates. Just keep picking away at it. More consistent years would be better. But whatever we get, we're going to continue to improve our understanding. So he was up first, but I'll come back. Promise. Yeah. Okay.
What's the general ballpark of when the weir is gonna go back in the spring?
Third week of May, probably. So yeah, we try to get it in for this, for the start of the king run.
Is there any plans to take any data on kelp return and their success rate or anything like that?
Kelps are really tricky to count. Particularly in the spring on the anchor, because we start with the sonar and you can't speciate and their size overlap with kings. So we got steelhead going down, got kings mostly going up, but those buggers don't just go up in the spring, they also come down a little bit. It's not all one direction. When we're running the weir on the two forks, that one you can put video in right away. We turn it on May 1, steelhead, up and down, constant, all day long, particularly the males. They just go up, come back down, go up, come back down. Even when we had video on the North Fork in the spring, I couldn't tell you how many steelhead there even were still going upstream and how many kelps were leaving, because it's just constant all day long, steelhead moving through both directions. So they're tricky. The movement is not just going back out. We've got this spawning movement on top of fish going out. The best that we have for kelp counts was that USGS project on the Ninilchik, late 90s to mid 2000s. And then we've had a couple of years where we've gotten that same weir in and have counted kelps there. That location works better. Ninilchik's interesting. The spawning distribution, I think, is farther into the system for some reason. But we've counted as many as 700 kelps on the Ninilchik. If you think about just say a 50% spawning and overwintering mortality, that puts you back up to 1,500, same size as the anchor. So, and I would think generally the anchor is probably double to triple the Ninilchik, as we see as it relates to kings and coho. Yeah.
What is the financial necessity to keep this going? How do we help continue?
So that's a great question and a good one for this room to hear, but we actually asked for very little money to continue the operation. We were looking for just 1 month of funding. We have another project in Catchmack Bay that helps leverage us to run the anchor through September. The anchor is only funded to Count Kings. So through July, it's actually a pretty cost-effective escapement monitoring project. We're getting coho with a bonus project. So to get Steelhead, we need 1 month of funding for 2 people. That was, basically $15,000. That's what we approached. When we started the discussion with TU chapters with Chenery's help, how can everybody help? I think if we really want to think about some more long-term solution and everybody being able to contribute, if we can get organized to have a fundraiser to, get those funds together on an annual basis, like we would be interested in doing that. It would be nice if it was buffered a little bit up, so we weren't just riding that one line every year kind of thing, that we built up a fund. It's like, okay, here's our Steelhead pond, putting it in, and now we're gonna run it for 3 years kind of thing. But I think with TU's help and the chapters organization, I think anybody would actually be able to contribute to that. And I kind of lean on TU to, come up with some potential ideas and solutions to get everybody together. I think that's the best part of this collaboration, is you have it in reverse. You have the state agency that oversees this, and I'm never going to be the one that says that we don't have enough funding to do our work. We extend ourselves to a maximum to monitor these stocks as best we can, and leverage efficiencies in our program to do a little bit more. But at the end of the day, our priority is still going to be our fisheries that have the most sustainability issues, and that's primarily been king salmon, right? We've got this steelhead fishery, it's catch and release only, and it's going on. Since that's gone into place, there's still good steelhead funds, right, to provide anglers the opportunity. That doesn't mean that it's not important to us, but the funding that we do get hardcore is going to go to things that are with harvest, and that we're providing those harvest opportunities, or paying close enough attention to take those harvest opportunities away when we need to. And so on a prioritized scale, steelhead are down for us a little bit, even though if we could, we would just do it. So hope that answers it. Yeah.
Do I know what steelhead doing in the ocean, right? Is it like tagging, or is it just total shit?
Yeah, I should get Logan to talk about it, because he's probably here. No, Logan's not gonna talk. He's a numbers guy. It was a work we tried. I'll be his spokesman too. So that USGS project, I said the archival tags. So I said they were fairly unsuccessful, but they did recover 1 tag, right, Logan? 1? Yeah. And so when that fish came back, they were able to look at like general position on where the fish was, the temperature of the water that it was in as it swam through the ocean. It was basically, the archival tag was recording the data constantly. It came back, and then they saw the fish with the archival tag, they pulled the tag and download it. But interestingly, that fish, it had the depth, the temperature, and like kind of an approximate location based on daylight for the calendar. And so the neatest thing about that fish was it never went below 6 or 10 feet deep. It stayed up in the water column. Fascinating, right? But it was like kind of the only one. And then recently, UAF had a grad student that did a satellite pop-up tag. So these are like kind of hard, rigid balloons on the outside of a fish. You tag it after a certain number of days after you tag it. It pops off, the connection dissolves, it pops up, and all the data goes to satellite, tells you everything. And so they tagged one in the Sea-Tuck. That fish went all the way to Kamchatka and never went deeper than 10 feet deep. Right? I got that right. So, fact check.
They don't know much about it.
No, generally no. The one thing that I've noticed paying attention to kind of some of our smaller runs, they're also occurring in years that have pretty small runs in the lower 48. A couple of years ago, Oregon closed the Deschutes, Washington closed Olympic Peninsula, and then BC closed the Skeena. You know, three of the largest like steelhead fisheries that we have in the Pacific Northwest. That was also the year we had our worst run on the Anchorage, just general feel wise. And so where we see kind of alternating trends with some of the other species, like when our kings are doing good, theirs aren't. Coho this past year, our coho were really bad. It was kind of fine in southeastern BC, and it was great in Oregon and Washington.
Is that a hatchery thing?
Not with coho. So what's steelhead do in the ocean? You know, they're caught in surveys just like the other salmon species, but generally the ocean, for what we know for all of our salmon species, it's a black box. I mean, we just don't know. We know generally, you know, what part of the food chain they feed in, and that's about it. Wherever they're caught in surveys, they're documented, but yeah, it's not much. Yeah.
How about site fidelity? Do you know how much the steelhead stray, or is an Anchor River born fish and Anchor River spawning for light fish?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know much. I gave a couple tidbits that suggest that they probably move around a little bit. I mean, if you have a fish that spawned in the Seatuck and kelps out and then goes over to Kamchatka, I mean, that should tell you something. So, I don't know. Yeah, we don't know. I don't know. I don't think there's been any genetic work really done with steelhead, you know? Like baseline?
Not on the lower beginners.
Yeah, but overall, like big geographic regions.
Nothing.
Okay,
They're pretty cyclical down there.
yeah,
Wasn't that one of the reasons like
say it again?
Isn't that one of the reasons they put the steelhead hatcheries because they're straining?
Let's say that was just a mess and we decided that we shouldn't be stocking steelhead. That was at a different time.
Stock Chester Creek and Campbell Creek.
Brittany?
They did, right?
Yeah, they did. And 6 Mile too. Was another place.
Rumor has it, they're still there.
6 Mile? Brittany?
Talked to some old
Steelhead,
timers in
6
Hope.
Mile?
I've heard it's in there.
Okay, just let me know. Send some photos with a backdrop.
I won't.
Well, that was good Q&A. Thank you.